Thanks for tuning in. My name is Sean Kennedy. I'm the Transit Planning Manager at the SFMTA, and here today to talk about the Taraval Rapid Project. I'm going to kick off the webinar and then turn it over to our planner on the project, Michael Rhodes, who will talk through intersection level details of the project. So let's get started. Before we get into the L specifically, I do want to give an overview of Muni Forward. The city has two major transportation goals. One is to reduce pedestrian and auto deaths to zero by 2024, known as Vision Zero. And the second is to improve Muni reliability. Muni Forward brings together on the major transit corridors, brings together these two ideas and city goals into one comprehensive project. And so when we do a project along the L, for example, we're not just making transit reliability improvements, we are also have the goal of improving pedestrian safety and driver safety along the corridor and advancing Vision Zero's goals. Additionally, Muni Forward has a number of other projects that are really service related, including red lanes throughout the city, service improvements like increasing headways along our major corridors that also fall under the Muni Forward umbrella. This map depicts the major corridors where we are working on transit priority and pedestrian safety improvement projects. We have legislated about 36 miles of transit and pedestrian safety improvements colored by the red and blue lines you see on the screen. And this includes about 100 pedestrian bulbs, over 60 transit bulbs, and about 12 miles of transit-only lanes. So why Taraval Street? Why is Taraval included in the Muni Forward program? So Taraval has a safety issue. Taraval Street, this section of Taraval from 15th out to 46th, is on the Vision Zero high collision network, meaning that about 12% of the city streets that make up 70% of the total accidents in the city happen along these corridors. And so Taraval and the safety issues along Taraval need to be addressed in order to advance Vision Zero goals and keep our riders and walkers in the city safe. Additionally, Taraval also has a slow and unreliable transit service, often causes bunching of trains that mean long waits in between gaps, as well as crowded trains when the trains do show up. That is one of our highest ridership lines in the Muni system. Now, the L corridor itself is going to be going through a state of good repair project that will take about 2 years to construct. It includes a number of things, track and overhead replacement, water and sewer replacement, and then once that work is done, eventually there will be surface repaving on the entire corridor. Now, when we put the street back, we really want to not just put the street back as it is today, but advance the city's transportation goals by improving safety along the L, as well as improving transit reliability. So the projects we're going to be talking about today are really related to improving transit safety and pedestrian safety, as well as transit reliability along the corridor. So we've been working for quite a while through a number of different methods and outreach methods to engage stakeholders, including businesses as well as residents along the L corridor with our project and trying to come up with the best final proposal that we can that will meet all the needs that the various stakeholders have along the corridor. And we've got a lot of great data and a lot of great input from various stakeholders that have helped shape this final proposal. The final proposal can really be boiled down into 5 major categories, and like I said, Michael Rhodes is going to talk through how each of these are applied at specific intersections along the corridor. But I do want to talk for a minute about boarding islands. Boarding islands, as pictured here, the one on the top is at Taraval and 23rd on the Taraval corridor, and the lower one is on Judas Street. Boarding islands provide a safe refuge for people to board and alight a train. Taraval Street is very unique in the fact that people actually get on and off the train in a live travel lane, and that just does not happen at most places throughout San Francisco or even throughout the United States. And boarding islands really provide that safety that pedestrians need when they're most vulnerable. Of course, I do want to be upfront and note that the biggest trade-off to boarding islands is the fact that removes on-street parking. There's not enough space in the roadway width to handle both on-street parking, a general travel lane, a boarding island, and a track lane, a transit lane. And so in these scenarios and the locations where we're proposing boarding islands, that does require the removal of on-street parking. So we've been working with the community through the idea of that trade-off of on-street parking and boarding islands, and have developed an idea of a pilot. This pilot would be applied at a number of places, and I'll get into the criteria in a minute, but at another number of places along the L that meet the certain criteria that we are talking about. It includes larger signs, as you notice on the right of this picture, as well as additional markings on the street, including a train loading area marking, as well as a stop ahead with a stop bar on the street. And really, this pilot is unique. As I mentioned, the idea that people board and alight the train in the middle of a live travel lane is very unique in San Francisco, and it turns out unique in the state of California. The CTCDC, the California Traffic Control Device Commission, basically regulates what type of markings that you put on the street to regulate how cars behave and how they follow state laws. We had to go to this group and get special permission for this pilot because this idea did not exist anywhere else in the state of California. Now, how do we pick the locations? Basically, safety, of course, is the #1 priority at the SFMTA. So we looked at places that had low risk for having pedestrian crashes. We had to make sure that any pilot location had no crashes during the study period, so it's about a 5-year period where we looked at data that involved pedestrian accidents, and also had few daily alighting. So most of our crashes are happening when people are getting off the train, not when people are getting on the train. So we wanted places that had the least amount of chance that people were getting off the train. And as it turns out, that's mostly in the inbound directions. As a matter of fact, we are proposing this pilot at 5 locations, and they're all in the inbound direction. How will we evaluate the pilot? We are looking at the number of drivers that are complying with the state law to stop behind a train that's boarding and alighting passengers, actively boarding and alighting passengers. The current compliance rate is about 60% on Taraval. So 6 out of 10 cars will stop when a train is boarding and alighting, but 4 out of 10 keep driving, and thus causing the safety issues. So we're really looking at if we can get driver compliance to around the 95th percentile, we will consider the pilot a success. I will say that the pilot is not just these engineering solutions. It is also looking at what we call the 3 E's, the engineering, enforcement, and education piece of the program. We are working with SFPD to do some really specific enforcement at these 5 pilot locations during the pilot, and then we'll also be doing an education campaign with the merchants as well as just general stakeholders along the corridor to try to help them get up to speed and really push the word out there on how people should be driving when they're approaching these transit vehicles. If a boarding island or a boarding island pilot location is not successful, the end result will be that a boarding island will be installed there, and the on-street parking will be removed. It's not really acceptable to go back to the no boarding island position if this pilot does not work out. Now we're looking at about a 6-month duration for the pilot, and we'll go from there on meeting with the community and letting people know our findings from the pilot and talking through kind of next steps at that point. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Planner Michael Rhodes, who will take us through the intersection level details.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. As Sean mentioned, I'm Michael Rhodes, Transit Planner with the SFMTA, and I'm going to walk through the detailed level intersection proposals. Starting on the western end of the project area, so this is the intersection right here of 46th and Taraval. That's basically where the project starts. Right now, there's an inbound stop right here on 46th Avenue that the El Taraval picks up passengers, and that's not proposed to change. In the outbound direction, there's a boarding island proposed, and that would serve the outbound El Taraval stop to improve safety for people boarding the train. And at 44th Avenue, boarding islands are proposed both here in the inbound direction and also in the outbound direction, again to improve safety for people riding the train. And this requires the removal of on-street parking adjacent to the boarding islands. That's what that -7 here shows. And to offset that, we have a number of parking proposals to really focus on making sure people can still find parking near Taraval. So right here you can see there is existing parallel parking that will be converted to angled parking under this proposal, and that's that +1, a gain of 1 parking space in total here, a gain of 1 parking space in total here on 47th at Taraval. And then zooming out, you can see that on the side streets, Santiago and Ulloa, additional parking conversion from parallel to perpendicular is proposed, and that would add 10 spaces here, 10 spaces here from the existing supply. And going back, I just want to highlight that these orange areas here are the approximate locations of commercial buildings on Taraval. So you can see there's these and some other changes as well. This blue highlight indicates that these parking spaces would become time-limited parking spaces. They're currently unlimited time parking spaces. People can park for as long as they want. They can stay there for up to 3 days. And this doesn't help very much in terms of having customers access the stores. So what we propose here is to convert these time-limited spaces with higher turnover, but only here in front of the corner building. You can see that the blue time-limited zone is adjacent to the orange commercial building zone. And similarly here on the south side of Taraval, either commercial buildings or other public facilities or buildings that are on the corner of Taraval would have these types of changes. Moving on from 43rd to 39th, we have a couple of boarding islands proposed in both directions. This is the 42nd Avenue inbound stop and outbound stop, both of which have a boarding island proposed, as well as the inbound stop at 40th and the outbound stop at 40th. There are a couple of things I want to draw your attention to here. First, this is actually a little different than most boarding islands right here. This is a wheelchair accessible higher level kind of ramp, so that if there's somebody with a wheelchair who needs to board the train, they can do so at this location. In general, our trains can only load wheelchair users at high level platforms, so they do need special infrastructure at these types of locations, and that would also be here in the inbound direction. The 40th Avenue stop does not have these wheelchair accessible platforms. I will also point out that this is the first location of our pilot program, 40th Avenue inbound. This boarding island is shown here, but that would only be installed in the event that the pilot is not successful. So if the pilot does succeed in eliminating driver non-compliance with the requirement to stop behind trains and safely let people get on and off the train, then that would determine whether or not this boarding island is actually installed down the line. As you can see, there is parking removal associated with these proposed boarding islands, and this parking removal would only occur if the pilot is not successful. And then there is some parking addition here, some conversion to time-limited parking on Taraval and on the first few spaces off of Taraval at a couple of locations. Zooming out, we can see Santiago and Ulloa and how we would convert parallel parking to perpendicular parking on several blocks here of Santiago and of Ulloa, gaining parking spaces in the process of doing so. That helps offset, once again, the parking removal associated with boarding islands on Taraval. From 39th to 34th, there are a few changes. The first one I want to draw your attention to here is a proposed sidewalk extension on the southwest and northeast corners of 38th and Taraval. And what that does is basically extends the sidewalk, creates a pedestrian bulb out so that pedestrians are more visible to traffic, and it creates a more safe crossing experience for pedestrians. That does remove about one parking space in both of these locations. And at Sunset Boulevard, there are existing sort of short boarding islands. That's the gray portion here. And we're proposing to extend those existing boarding islands. This is the orange portion where we're actually connecting to existing portions of sort of short boarding island infrastructure. That's the case both in the outbound and the inbound direction, where we're making sure the boarding islands are long enough to serve a two-car L Taraval train and create a safe loading experience. That does require some changes in terms of what direction you can kind of travel. On 37th, for instance, you'd no longer be able to make a left turn because of the existence of this boarding island. You'd have to make a right turn instead of going straight or left. Similarly, if you're heading southbound on 37th Avenue, you'd be required to make a right. A straight movement would not be allowed. And that is a similar kind of change at 37th or 36th Avenue here associated with the outbound boarding island at Sunset Boulevard, which once again would be extended. At 35th Avenue, the outbound stop is proposed for removal to improve travel time on the L. The inbound stop, I will actually, again, point you to a pilot location here. So the inbound 35th Avenue stop is located right here, and we're proposing to keep a stop at this time, but have it be part of the pilot project and see whether or not that's successful in reducing and eliminating the risk to people boarding the train. Some parking addition is visible here on 35th, 34th. Some time limits would be added here on the first few spaces off of Taraval at 38th. And I'm going to zoom out now and show a broader view of this area. We can see that there's a little bit of parking addition here through the conversion of angled parking at the end of the block on 38th as it approaches Ulloa. Our next slide, 34th to 29th Avenues. Two boarding islands are proposed in both directions. This is at the existing stop at 32nd Avenue, both directions, and 30th Avenue. And a couple things to draw your attention to. The 32nd and 30th stops are both in the inbound direction proposed as pilots. So if that striping and signage pilot is successful, these boarding islands would not be installed in that case, and therefore this parking removal would not be required. I'll also draw your attention to the proposed wheelchair accessible ramp at 30th, and that is there to serve the 66 bus transfer point. In the outbound direction, there is not the ability to do a wheelchair accessible ramp right at 30th, so that would actually have to be installed at the nearest possible location, which is at 28th Avenue, and I'll show you that in a couple of slides from now. I will say that although a pilot is proposed on the inbound direction at 30th for the main boarding island, the wheelchair accessible boarding island would be installed regardless. That's just this short segment of it due to the fact that even with the pilot wheelchair, that would not by itself make the trains wheelchair accessible, so you do need a ramp to achieve that. Some parking changes, the parking removal associated with boarding islands, and there is conversion to angled parking once again on many of the side areas, and a number of spaces here again shown in blue where unlimited parking would turn into customer-oriented, time-limited parking to create more turnover and availability. And also bulb outs, pedestrian bulb outs are proposed here at 33rd. Zooming out, you can see there's some opportunities here to convert existing parallel parking to angled parking on Ulloa, Santiago, gaining back the parking that's lost on Taraval due to the boarding islands. From 29th to 25th, the main boarding island change is the installation of boarding islands at 26th Avenue stop in both directions. This is another pilot location for the inbound stop, so this would only be installed in the inbound direction if the pilot is not successful. And as I mentioned previously, at 28th Avenue, this is the location of the wheelchair accessible ramp. It's actually more associated with the main stop at 30th Avenue, and the general stops at 28th Avenue would be removed. So only if you're a wheelchair user would this location be usable. And the stop signs at 28th would be removed and replaced with a signal. What that does is allow trains to continue through the intersection since they no longer need to stop to make a pickup for passengers at this location at 28th. And as you can see, some conversion in purple here from existing unlimited parking spaces to metered parking spaces for just the first couple of spaces off of Taraval on a few of the side streets here. And zooming out, you can see that there is additional parking conversion from parallel to perpendicular on Ulloa and Santiago, helping to offset the parking removal associated with boarding islands. From 25th to 21st, the main change is the extension proposed of existing boarding islands. So there's actually, this is an outbound boarding island at 23rd Avenue, and it would be proposed to be extended through the crosswalks here to be the full length of a two-car train. Similarly, from 22nd to 21st Avenue, that inbound stop would be proposed to be extended to meet the length of a two-car train. These are both existing accessible stops, and they do, as you can see here, have wheelchair accessible ramps, which would be preserved as part of this project. At 24th, it's actually not shown here, but this is the location of an inbound stop that's proposed to be removed right here at 24th Avenue. And as a result, we would add a signal so that trains can pass through there without stopping at the stop sign that's there presently. And pedestrian bulb outs are proposed here at 24th and at 22nd Avenue on the southwest and northeast corners. At 22nd Avenue, also there is a, right here where the cursor is, there's an outbound stop, and that's proposed for removal. And again, that's part of why this signal is proposed here, so the trains are able to pass through the intersection since there's no longer going to be a stop. And as you can see, there's some parking removal associated with some of these changes, some parking metered areas here on the first few spaces off of Taraval where existing spaces will be converted to parking meters just for the first few spaces adjacent to commercial buildings. And zooming out, you can see that there's an opportunity on one block of Santiago here to convert existing parallel parking to perpendicular parking to add back parking removed as part of the boarding island extensions nearby on Taraval. From 21st to 17th Avenue, the key change is the addition of boarding islands at both the inbound and outbound 19th Avenue stops. So that's shown here for inbound and here for outbound. A key distinction here is that because 19th Avenue is our highest injury location for pedestrians getting on and off of trains, this is not proposed as a pilot location in either direction, and it is proposed as boarding islands for both. And they would be wheelchair accessible as shown here. This is a wheelchair accessible ramp portion of the island. A traffic signal is proposed both at 18th Avenue and 17th Avenue, again associated with removing the stop here at 17th Avenue, so trains would be able to pass through there and not stop at a stop sign. At an 18th Avenue, it's due to pedestrian volumes and traffic volumes. And 20th Avenue, we do have pedestrian bulb outs proposed. So you can see there's some proposed conversion of existing spaces to metered spaces here on 19th Avenue and at 17th Avenue to replace the metered spaces on Taraval. And I'll point out here, this is for a future condition on 19th Avenue where eventually the existing bus stop is proposed to move to the south side of Taraval, and that would restore parking here along this segment, which would be metered. And that's part of a separate project that's already been approved by the SFMTA board. Zooming out, we can see this is a more constrained area. We're still looking at 21st to 17th Avenue. Unfortunately, there is not the space or the ability with the spacing of driveways to add parking on Santiago or Ulloa here. This is existing angled parking, so that's already been converted. This is just a more constrained part of town, so unfortunately that is not possible in this segment. From 17th to 15th, a couple of changes here. First, you can see conversion to metered parking here on 17th. And as I mentioned previously, the stops in both directions will be removed at 17th for the El Taraval. In the outbound direction, you can see this is a transit-only lane that's proposed, and as you've seen throughout the proposal, that's proposed for the full length from 46th to 15th in the center running lanes. In the inbound direction, however, the two lanes of Taraval will actually merge down to a single lane shown here. They'll be shared by trains and by general automobile traffic. And that will then, there will be a transit bulb that will extend from the sidewalk to meet trains here at 15th and Taraval. And parking will be retained here. There's no car shown, but there will be parking still from 16th to 15th. And this transit bulb, because there's actually already driveways in red zone here, that does not remove any parking in this segment. In the outbound direction, this is the location of the existing outbound El Taraval stop at 15th, and a curb extension would be installed in order to meet the train and have people step off directly onto the curb. And I will note as well that, as you may know, the inbound stop at 15th and Taraval is actually on 15th now, so the train approaches the intersection, stops for a stop sign, and then inches forward and picks up passengers here past the stop sign. So it's stopping twice, and that's why we're actually moving the stop to the near side of Taraval, or near side of 15th, so it doesn't have to stop twice to pick up passengers, and stop for the stop sign. And to offset some of the parking removal associated with this bulb out, existing parallel parking on Taraval between 14th and 15th would be converted to perpendicular parking for the last several spaces, similarly on Funston Avenue. Zooming out, you can see we're also proposing parking addition on Ulloa between 17th and 16th through perpendicular parking. Finally, the 15th Avenue at Ulloa stops in both directions for the El Taraval are proposed to be removed to save travel time and improve reliability. That covers all of the proposed changes as part of the El Taraval Rapid Project. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. There's a couple of ways to do it. You can email us at muniforward@sfmta.com or visit our project website, muniforward.com/L. Thank you.